experience. Actually, we have like Polisa Kuzula, who's going to be the moderator of the conversation. And actually, she's an activist, also an academic, and she's so much interested in multilingualism, biliteracy. She has done training in community level and also in the academia level. She's an author and also a storyteller. She has invested so much time actually in contributing in making sure that the education system in South Africa is improved. She also worked with teachers, so she'll be moderating the conversation, and also she will be introducing actually our panelists and also driving the conversation. I think maybe as you're all busy connecting, just in the chat room, if maybe you can say what comes to your mind, one word, what comes to your mind when you saw the line, freedom to learn. If you can just post one word that came to your mind when you had freedom to learn, you can just post that in the chat room, and then we can take it from there. But for now, I see Equity, so you can just post your thoughts. Let it rain in the chat room with one word that came to your mind when you saw the line, freedom to learn. Also around this conversation, talk about freedom to learn in the context of our education, and also talking about actually the South African school classroom post-COVID-19 and what is happening. But that is not my part. My part was just to welcome everyone on the call. And now I'm just going to pass it on to Polisa Kuzula, who's going to be driving the conversation. Please feel free to join in, ask questions in the chat room, ask questions on Facebook, and also participate as much as you can. So, Polly, over to you. This is again HCI Foundation, Freedom to Learn Conversation. It is important we listen to each other, we engage, we ask questions, and we move together as a country. Polly, over to you.
Thank you, Malusi, Molweni, Dumelang, Dimacheroni, Abucheni, Sanibonani, Goeiemiddag. It's great to have you in this conversation, which has been organized by HCI, a conversation about how the school and classroom community has changed post-COVID-19. And here in this conversation, we have two teachers and two teacher trainers. And so it's very interesting to hear from teachers about their experiences. So I'll start by introducing the teachers. We have Unonkululeko Giba. Unonkululeko is doing her honors at the University of Free State. She has done her teaching practice in a rural village in KZN, and also has done a teaching practice in the Free State in a private school. So she kind of have a best of both worlds, so that she can give us and offer us more diverse experiences that she has experienced during COVID-19. We have Siseko Jukuda. Siseko is doing teaching practice at Wynberg Girls High School and teaches English and history. So she is also a new teacher who's got training during the time of COVID. So hopefully her experiences of learning to become a teacher during COVID will also help us to understand the challenges that new teachers have faced, both as student teachers as well as teachers in schools. Then we have Judy Sachs. Judy is my colleague at UCT. We train teachers together in initial teacher education, but Judy also works with in-service training, teachers who are already out there working in schools, and she works in our NQT program. The NQT program means newly qualified teachers for UCT, and she has been mentoring and coaching the new teachers in their first year of teaching. And as we know, NQT accepts not only UCT teachers, but accepts also teachers from other institutions in the province. I should hope maybe Judy will talk more about it if it takes student teachers from other provinces. But in Cape Town, it has had students from Stellenbosch, from UWC, from CPUT, as well as UCT. Welcome, Judy, and welcome Nonkululeko and Siseko. And lastly, we have Nobuntu Mazeka. Nobuntu Mazeka has also been my colleague in education. We worked together at the Nelson Mandela Institute for Education and Rural Development. She has a vast rural experience of training teachers in the rural villages of the Eastern Cape, in Bizana and in Mqanduli. And she is very passionate about language and literacy and also mathematics, as she works with teachers in those fields. Welcome, Nobuntu. If you could turn on your Nobuntu, if you could turn on your camera, I would really appreciate that. So both Judy and Nobuntu are teacher trainers and mentors and coaches from urban and rural setting. And we also see Siseko is in an urban setting, while Nonkululeko has had experience in both urban setting and rural setting. Now, linked to the hashtag freedom to learn, we talk about education as also linked to the Bill of Rights in education, which really tells us that children have a right to learn. They have a right to be schooled, to education. So we also know that before COVID-19 pandemic, everyone was lamenting the failing education system, talking about a bimodal education system or a two-tiered education system, which means that we have an education for the poor and education for the rich in one country. People were talking about poor performance of learners in literacy and mathematics in the country, and some people are lamenting the effects of language in teaching, as well as teaching methods and poverty in education. But the DBE has been trying to respond to these issues before COVID. But then the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has reversed some of the gains that were made by the DBE in trying to improve education. The DBE has said that between 50% and 75% of learning that takes place during a normal school year has been lost during COVID-19. So from urban and peri-urban and rural classrooms, learners and teachers have been forced to adapt to new ways, to a new normal, without any warning or preparation. The HCI Foundation and its partners have therefore invited you, Nobuntu, Judy, Nonkululeko, and Siseko, to share your experiences, your innovation, and ways to rebuild South African school communities from where you are as we chart our way forward. I will now start with the teachers, Nonkululeko Kiba and Siseko Juguda, and would like to ask them to share, as fairly new teachers who have started teaching during the pandemic, to share, to ask them, how has your experience been during this time, your experience as student teachers, as well as experiences in the classroom. So I'll start with Siseko.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Siseko, as it has been said already. So I graduated in December 2019, and I started my career as a teacher in 2020 as an intern and not as a full-time teacher in the classroom. And even my internship year was quite short-lived because I only had one term of normal schooling before the pandemic broke out. I had to adapt very, very quickly, and it had shifted from an internship with a very light teaching schedule towards a heavy teaching schedule, which is similar to what my colleagues who were full-time teachers had at the time. And like I said, I had to adapt very, very quickly. And what had also happened is, because of the time and how limited we were in terms of how much time we had, there was a loss of mentorship a lot and observation, because the school needed all hands on deck in terms of teaching, in terms of enforcing COVID regulations, in terms of out of the classroom activities, and out of classroom duties we had as teachers as well. And one thing I forgot to preface my answer with is that I am in a very, very privileged position. I am in a quintile 5 fee-paying school. So it's an all-girls school in the southern suburbs of Cape Town. So my experience is not the experience of the average South African teachers. We are very privileged in terms of resource and human resources as well. So yeah, I had to adapt quickly and roll with the punches. But I also want to say, although my role changed immensely, and although I had to take on new duties, which includes teaching more, screening learners, enforcing COVID regulations, the school already had an online ecosystem whereby learning could take place despite the fact that learners were not in the classroom. So I was very, very privileged in that sense. And I had to learn how to use all of the online resources the school had, because these are things that I was not familiar with before. Although we had been introduced to some while we were doing the PGCE, I had to learn to use them as an educator and not as a student. So it was a very, very interesting time for me.
Thank you, Siseko. Now we'd like to hear from Nonkululeko.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I was struggling with the network, so I just logged in now. I didn't get the question.
The question is asking you to share your experiences of being a student teacher during COVID-19 and being a teacher in the classroom during COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so let me just start by introducing myself. I'm Nonkululeko Ngiba. I am currently doing my honors at the University of the Free State. So I finished my qualification last year. I'm a newly qualified teacher. I did my practicals, I think it was 2019. So starting from 2019, and then everything was perfectly fine, you know. And then 2020, I did my third year. There was COVID. And everything was different. Everything changed. The dynamics of the school, the learning, the teaching style of the school has to change. And there were new regulations and that teachers had to follow. So I went to, during COVID, I went to a private and also the public school, where public school was very, very difficult for the learners to adapt, and also teachers to adapt to the new, protocols that we're in. So I remember in grade 8, there were, especially the beginning of the pandemic, it was very hard because the grade 8s didn't have to attend all the classes. They attended only on Tuesday and Thursday. So that made it more not easy for the learners to especially for the teachers to finish their syllabus, right? So then on 2020, I went to a private school where I saw that everything was different. They used technology. So when COVID struck, I think the way privilege, I may say it like that, because they used Teams, they were able to use technology. For me, it was hard for me because I was not aware with technology a lot, especially with projectors and making slides. So I had to adapt in all of that through this pandemic. So learners have to, go to use technology now. They use slides, they use projectors. Others couldn't attend because of COVID. The class sizes have to be little. Other learners attended online, others attended in class. So everything was very difficult for the beginning of the pandemic, even now.
Thank you so much, Nonkululeko. And now I'd like to our teacher trainers, Judy and Nobuntu, to talk to us about your teacher training and how it has been affected and how you have managed to support teachers during this time.
Thanks, Sis Claudie. Can I come in?
Yes, you can come in, Judy.
Afternoon, everybody, and just a big thank you to Claudie and to the HCI Foundation, and how wonderful it is to give teachers a voice and a platform. I think it's wonderful that we actually get to hear from the teachers on the ground. So if I can just quickly, before I get to your actual question, I just wanted to say that for so many, COVID increased the pressures of teachers immensely. They were dealing with their learners' anxieties and loss. They were dealing with, teachers had their own anxieties and loss. Teachers suddenly had to take over from sick colleagues. Teachers suddenly had to work out new ways of teaching and being. And I also think one of the things that knocked the education system the most were these taken for granted that we'd never questioned before. So I think it was Nonkululeko just said, this issue of the grade 8s only coming in a few times a week. We'd never before had this situation where learners weren't with their teachers 5 days a week. And I think that was a taken for granted that suddenly we hadn't realized what that momentum of teaching meant, and teachers were really struggling with having to condense a huge amount of teaching into a much reduced space of time. So that momentum of teaching, I think, was huge. One of the good things about COVID was that for some schools, they were able to make smaller classes, and we saw how the teachers loved that. Even though it meant they only saw their learners intermittently, we all saw the huge benefit of having much smaller classes, because we know in South Africa, so many of the class sizes are immense, and how hard it is for our teachers to deal with that. So suddenly having a class of 20 was quite a gift, and teachers were able to do much more with some of their learners. And then another thing that I really believe COVID showed us was this idea of how important it is to be together in the classroom. Teachers were incredibly resourceful online, teaching via WhatsApp, sending packs home, but without exception, all the teachers I've been working with have said the best thing is to be in the class with the learners. You cannot beat that. So again, that was a taken for granted. That was the way we used to teach, and suddenly that was taken away. And I think that was a big thing for our teachers to deal with. And also what I want to say is, which was wonderful, is how we saw, so Siseko was one of the 2019 graduates, and she was, in her first year in 2020, and suddenly the 2020 new teachers became leaders in their own right, because they were the younger members in the staff room who were able to take these platforms, and we saw how our NQTs, our newly qualified teachers, really rose to the challenge. And it was incredibly heartwarming to see these new inexperienced teachers find ways and means to connect. We saw how they were actually teaching and helping other colleagues who were not familiar and who couldn't see any other way of teaching. So I just want to take my hat off to those teachers who came in and who became leaders in their own right when things were so upside down. We saw incredible resourcefulness, we saw incredible creativity. So I just those were my comments and what we learned from those first months and terms. In terms of teacher training, I think I'm repeating myself, I think we realized the value of being in the classroom with learners. So one of the big impacts it's had is it's reduced, and in some cases, very sadly, it's taken away their teaching practical experience. So it's always been a big part of the BEd and the PGCE study years to go into schools and to have those experiences. And then suddenly with COVID, schools were obviously very resistant to having more people on the campus. There were suddenly all these restrictions. So we saw how that affected our students, and we've seen it we've seen those students going into the classroom, how they haven't had that teaching experience and how it's really impacted on them in their first year, in their first terms. It's been even, I mean, I think becoming a new teacher is really, really difficult. It became even more difficult because they hadn't even had very much practical experience in the classroom. So that's the one thing. And then just yeah. Chloe, should I stop there?
Yes, thank you very much, Judy. I think we should now, you are raising important issues around teachers who have been trained but haven't attended haven't done the teaching practice and the challenges that come with that. And then Nonkululeko spoke about the technology. I'm going to come back to that, but I would like to hear from Nobuntu Mazeka about her experiences as a teacher trainer and how her teacher training has been affected, and also how she managed to support teachers during the pandemic. Nobuntu, you are on mute.
I'm mute myself.
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Good day, colleagues. Good day, Oli. It's been a long time not seeing each other. Hey, I don't even know where to start, but I'll try by all means to be brief. And as you know that I'm not only the teacher trainer, I also spend time in the classrooms with teachers just to check how the curriculum lands in the classroom. So in the advent of the COVID, hey, we're serving in a chaotic way, in a chaotic world. And of course, it was not business as usual. So for us, we have to learn to adapt to a lot of new things that were thrown at us by the environment that we suddenly find ourselves have to work in. One of the first things that were kind of become distorted was the issue of the teacher training. We only managed to do the training only for term 1 on 2020, and then we dispersed the materials for teaching and learning in classrooms at the same time, even before the training. Just before the teachers could even finish term 1, then there was the lockdown. So you can imagine we were just caught with our pants down. No one was prepared as to what is going to happen. But fortunately enough, we tried by all means through the communication that we had with parents and with some of the teachers that are staying in the villages, because for us, we work in areas that are more rural than the other in the context of the country. So we try by all means with teachers to make sure that some of the learners are taking their packages home, but now parents have to adapt from being mere parents that are just saying to parents, wake up and go to school, and now they have to take a new role of using the workbook that to us is a teaching tool. It's not even a homework book, and try to work with learners in showing them how to learn the content and how to do some of the things that they needed to be done. Nonetheless, on term 2, because the materials were already in with the printers for term 2, so we had to find ways and means of also distributing the materials to the learners' home. The learners took the risk of coming to school and pick up the materials, and the teachers were showing them some of the few ropes as to what are some of the things that they should do. And coming to the challenges then, because also that intervention on its own was not enough, because we had a problem with issues of connectivity to those parents that were able to connect with teachers on WhatsApp, and some of them were receiving SMSs. But sometimes the SMS also will delay, especially if the parent had some credit with MTN, so she won't be able to send the SMS on time. But nonetheless, some of the gains that we have learned during the COVID was the strong bond between the 3 pillars, that is the parent, the school, and the learner. So most of the parents really were hands on the deck, and they were trying their level best to implement what they've been shown by the teachers. And they will bring the workbooks for marking so that the teacher could also point out some of the things that needs to be rectified. But of course, you know that we are in rural context, the backlogs now that we see in the classrooms, because at the moment we are post, not really post, but at least we had enough time now to have a contact session with learners in the classrooms, now that things are like going back to normal. But the backlogs in terms of mathematics, learners are having problems with number sense. Some of them, they're at grade 3 now, because when the COVID started, they were at grade 1. And they struggle with basics like 10ness of numbers, they're still counting ones, and they struggle also with issues of phonics when they have to write number names. And not to mention some of the things also that we see them coming as gaps with language in terms of reading and writing. But nonetheless, the teachers are trying their level best, and also the materials that you are giving to them during the training, because the only training that we had now, that was a conduct session, was also on term 1 this year, after we've been away for almost 2 years. And of course, the teaching is happening now in the same classrooms that are characterized by overcrowding, and teachers find it difficult to reach out, because also they have to be mindful of the time on task and the work coverage. Those are the pressures that they are working under, and they are trying their level best. And also for us, we are trying our level best to support them in the classroom. So those are some of the things that we are really grappling with at the moment. And of course, the anxiety that teachers had of losing their colleagues also during the COVID is still playing out.
Thank you, Nobuntu. Thank you very much for laying bare for us what is going on practically in the classrooms. And I know your work has always been going into the schools, not just training teachers from any institution far away from the schools, but also coming into the classrooms to work and support the teachers in their classrooms. But now, just on the topic that you have mentioned about the digital technologies that you and Nonkululeko actually mentioned about learners. In fact, even Siseko mentioned how learners had to learn using digital technologies. Just on that topic of digital technologies and literacies, the Bualit Language and Literacy Collective, working on social justice in the use of language in education, they wrote an open editorial at the start of COVID-19 saying, and I quote, "While provincial education departments are circulating guidelines for children to continue to follow the official curriculum via online learning and e-teaching, parents, teachers, and children without access to computers, content in African languages, Wi-Fi, even electricity, are wondering how the children will learn." Now, as you know, Nobuntu in particular, that teachers in the classroom often translanguage for children in order to mediate learning, translanguage or code switch, because we still have learners learning through the medium of English from grade 4 onwards. And when the learners don't understand, teachers often translanguage or code switch to make sure that the children understand what is going on, instead of continuing without learners having understood what they are learning. So now, how was this language issue addressed in radio, on television, and online material, and as well as the materials that were given to parents at schools?
The question is for me, Toli?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Unfortunately, where I am, which is the rural part of the Eastern Cape in Pisana, under the Winnie-Madikizela local municipality, the learners, they didn't even have the access to the materials that we are talking about. They only rely on days that they have to attend classrooms through rotation, meaning sometimes you go 2 days in a week, and then there's a gap of 1 week in between, and then you need to go the other following week. As a result, they ended up having 4 days in a month. And even when the schools were back, there's a shortage of teachers in classrooms. So it's likely that the only contact with learning materials is the one that has to be presented by the teacher. And the teachers were the only ones that have access to what the department termed as streamed curriculum. So the teachers has to go back to the traditional ways of teaching as before the COVID. So there was no online content for learners to interact with. And on top of that, the inaccessibility of the signal the connectivity is an issue, because even myself, I'm struggling right now to connect with you. And of course, knowing the CSE levels of our communities, they don't have enough money to buy data for Wi-Fi, so that their learners also can just try to find the content using the smartphones if they are available. But most parents are having feature phones.
Mm. So meaning that even if the learners were, even if the learners had technologies and could receive the material, they wouldn't easily have access to it as well without the language issue being taken into account, because often in the classroom, the teacher mediates that learning. So this is also something, connectivity and language are also things that impacted, especially the rural schools, but also the township schools. I want to now come back to Sisonke and Nonkululeko. I want to find out if there have been any learning losses that you noticed in your children since the pandemic, and how do you think these can be addressed? Let's start with you, Siseko.
I have definitely noticed a lot of learning losses within my learners, especially as an English teacher. So seeing how my learners still struggle with things like reading for meaning, seeing how their vocabulary is not at the level which it should be, seeing them struggle a lot has been eye-opening for me. And it hasn't been shocking at all, because we did lose out on a lot of teaching time during COVID. So when they did come back into class intermittently, that is, we made use of the resources that we had already. So we already were working through the Google online ecosystem. We already had internet connectivity, and we knew that at least one member in the family has a device, be it a cell phone or a laptop, where they could connect to the internet. And we knew that they all had all of the books that they needed in order to get by. So we had to be a little bit more creative in terms of how we worked with learners. And we took advantage of all of the new resources we had discovered through online learning when it was hard lockdown, in order to mitigate or to bridge the gap between their knowledge levels and to help them catch up a lot. So that is what we did. And although we made use of all of these resources, we still found that there was still a huge gap. So even right at the beginning of this year, we are still back to the word I use, for lack of a better word, where we are still helping them sort of close the gaps that they have in knowledge, and helping them get to a grade 8 level of reading, or grade 9 level of writing, or grade 10 level of understanding. So I would say, once again, I'm in a very privileged position where we have all of the resources we need, and we have tried to take advantage of all of those resources in order to help those learners catch up.
Thank you, Siseko. Nonkululeko, how do you think that the Department of Education could have made full use of television and radio for the many children who didn't have access to the resources that Siseko is talking about?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Can I just go to her question first and then go to the department part?
Okay.
So I just want to start from the beginning of the COVID. As I mentioned before, that there were classes that couldn't attend you know, the grades that couldn't attend during the week. So I feel like those were like losses, because even the teachers were unable to finish the syllabus, which was very difficult to you know, at that period. It was very difficult for the other grades to attend every classes. So I feel like there were a lot of losses, even though the teachers were trying to make it up for the learners to attend on weekends, to attend, maybe to cover all the work that was supposed to be covered. But I feel like for me, it has a biggest impact on the learners of not being able to, you know, not being able to cover all the work. So going back to the department, based on education on the television or the radio, I feel like they were able to bring that, to deliver that education through their channels, I mean learning channels that the learners were able to catch up to. But in terms of where I come from a very rural area. I come from Mebamhlope rural area reserve, so it's a very rural area. So you get to see that they are houses that don't have like television. The houses that don't have like radios. So it's difficult, you know, it's difficult, especially for the matriculates, because there is another channel on SABC 1 where they just play all the, I think it's about around 5 or 6, where they play like all the things like education, the education studies day. So yeah, I feel like for me, it was advantage for the learners who are privileged, but for learners that are unfortunate, you know, from your areas, it's really difficult, because we don't have television, we don't have radios that we can go through and just listen to all the studies that have been studied there.
Thank you, Nonkululeko. Thank you to everyone who has answered the question. Now I'm like thinking back to now, Judy. You mentioned the challenges that your teachers presented to you as a teacher trainer and mentor, the challenges that they have been experiencing in school. So what innovative ideas did you help them with in order for them to be able to teach during the pandemic, and how has the NQT program really reached out to many newly qualified teachers?
Thanks, Polly. So previously, the Newly Qualified Teachers Project was very much an in-person program, and then thankfully we were able to relocate to these digital platforms, and it was actually quite wonderful to see how teachers responded and how much we were able to do in terms of linking teachers, connecting teachers, supporting teachers online. So my mentoring, which previously had been done in the classroom with the teachers, you know, became a WhatsApp call or a Zoom call, and teachers were quite grateful to continue the mentoring and continue the connections. We also saw teachers being incredibly supportive to each other. I think even besides COVID and all of this, teachers often feel like they're working alone. There's sadly, I find, a very silo mentality in many staff rooms. And what we were able to do through the NQT project, what we always did do, but it was in person, and now with COVID, we were able to have teachers on a WhatsApp group saying, I need this, what's your school doing, what's working for you, how are you managing this? And it was everything from screening the learners to different teaching methods, to finding resources, to supporting each other. So the digital platform allowed us to continue supporting and working with teachers. It allowed us to continue our mentoring and professional development program, because I feel we lost a bit, but still we were able to continue workshops and sessions online. The reason why we lost a bit is, as you know, Nobuntu and Nonkululeko were saying, not everybody's got connectivity. So our teachers are the teachers we're working with are all over the country, and we know that not everybody is able to connect. So we were still running the sessions and the workshops, but not everybody was able to connect. However, we were doing the best that we could to try and keep teachers supported. And I think the teachers were quite remarkable. I really believe they stood up and they helped each other, and so many teachers we saw going above and beyond for their learners. It was incredibly heartwarming to see how teachers really worked very, very hard and very, very late to try and be there for their learners, not only academically, but we saw emotionally to really try and support everyone from the foundation phase through to the grade 12s.
We are talking about freedom to learn, and last year in March already, some of the schools had returned full on teaching from Monday to Friday, but a lot of schools started moving to full on teaching in August. And so for me, that really pained me to see this huge inequality being recreated during COVID-19, where some learners were experiencing full days of teaching and some only just 2 days of teaching a week. So now, since August 2021, we have returned to education as normal. I'll put that in inverted commas, as there are no more rotational classes and lockdowns. Nobuntu, what are some of the challenges that teachers are experiencing with this? Have there been improvement in the school conditions that were there before COVID-19 and during COVID-19? And how is the curriculum assisting with this transition from teaching rotationally to teaching full-time?
Thank you, Polly. In fact, we cannot run away from the fact that some of schools are still on rotation, even now, because they are forced by a number of learners that the classrooms are able to accommodate. The biggest challenge at the moment with teaching and learning is the fact that there is not enough space even for teaching and learning to happen, whereas, as we were saying, since August, they were said to be going back to normal. And again, for us as the Nelson Mandela Institute, with our focus on foundation phase, we are trying by all means to give teachers and learners the materials that we think they would be able to address the backlogs that seem to be becoming one of the systemic barriers now to learning. And of course, we are adding on or building on the work that we have been doing with parents last year around homework, where we had grade 2s in particular. You know, grade 2 is the midline of our foundation phase in schools. So we had this focus of homework booklets that were simple few pages, but focusing on really important content areas that the learners and parents were embarking on. And for us, we're giving them SMSs as reminders on Mondays and also on Fridays. So at the moment, there is no norm, Oli. There is no normality. The classrooms are not conducive for teaching and learning. Yet the resources, some of the schools are privileged if they work with NGOs like us, but others that are underprivileged, then they don't even have someone to nudge them to a certain direction and to say, I'm with you, I see you, I know, and I know how difficult it is. I'm taking your hand, we are working together.
Thank you, Nobuntu. Actually, on that note, on NGO, the NGO sector has been working in education and learning, and it found itself having to innovate overnight and to turn stones into bread to stop the rainwater from getting inside the house. Teachers were drowning, learners were knee-deep, and a serious intervention needed to be actioned as a matter of urgency. So Nobuntu and Judy, what is the role of the NGO sector in getting things to work as a way forward? What do you think NGOs could help with as we move forward. Let's start with Judy.
I feel all the support that teachers can get is most welcome, and that's everything from pedagogical classroom resources as well as psychosocial emotional support. And I also believe, and this is, I mean, I'm listening to what Siseko was saying, but I think that foundation phase, the losses in the foundation phase are so immense. I would say any push, any drive towards literacy would be the most important thing. So to really focus the learners on that, at that level, again, in terms of time, resources, I feel the losses have been huge, and that to me would be a really important thing. Sorry, there's so much to say. It's quite hard to find exactly, but yeah, I think there is a great need for NGOs to be there for the teachers and the colleagues.
Thanks, Judy. Nobuntu, any words to add on that?
I think more importantly, I agree with Judith on what she's saying, but also we need to forge partnerships with each other so that I know what Judith is doing this side and I'm able to borrow some of the expertise from her, but not to forget that we need to work with teachers as a formidable force. We don't have the solutions to their challenges and problems in the classroom. Remember, they are the managers and they're there day in and day out. So they know the classroom more than we do. They know their learners, they know the context. So we need to work with teachers in finding solutions in addressing the systemic barriers that are created by the backlogs during the pandemic.
Thank you, Nobuntu. As we bring this to a close, I would like us to think about, especially Siseko and Nongululeko, to talk to us about how they view the education system and whether it is something that they think that they had signed up for, or it has changed their perception, their experiences, whether your experiences have changed the perception of what teaching is like. Siseko.
It definitely has changed my perception. I do think that the role of educators, especially during COVID over the past few years, has widened a lot, and especially for me in the context in which I teach. So many people out there say that more privileged schools are less likely to focus on the pastoral side in terms of caring for learners and forming very solid relationships with learners, getting to know learners and so forth. So I think that has changed a lot. And as it was previously mentioned before, our learners have experienced tremendous loss due to COVID and due to other issues that arose as a result of the lockdown and of COVID as well. Another thing which has changed immensely is our role in and out of the classroom. Previously, before, if a learner wanted to leave the classroom for online learning, they had to switch schools. And there were people who were experts in terms of online learning or in terms of blended learning. So now we as teachers, had to become online learning experts overnight. So our role has expanded in terms of that. And even with teachers who were initially reluctant to go online and to make use of all the other alternative means of learning during this time, have taken a liking to all of the resources and do continue to use them. And another change which I have noticed also within my context is, although we are a very, very privileged school, there are learners who are here not because of privilege, but because they have been awarded opportunities through scholarships and other means in order to be here. So they go from environments where there's very little resource to the school where there is more than enough resource. And so I think teachers here have been able to recognize the differences and the disparities between different learners as well. And we are able to tailor our learning to those learners who differ in resource and what they have available to them. So I think it has increased sensitivity around that as well. And in terms of, willingness to put in more, I guess. So I walked into teaching thinking, okay, this is the amount of time teachers put in. This is what teachers do. So I think my understanding and my perception has basically been blown out of the water. And I now have a better and a wider understanding of what it is that teachers do. And my role has also changed and grown as things have changed and grown within the education landscape as well.
Thank you so much, Siseko. Nonkululeko, can you briefly answer the question so we can close?
Yes. So based on my perspective, I think it has changed me during this pandemic. Firstly, a teacher has to be a facilitator and also have to be a protector. So I feel like during this pandemic, us as teachers have to protect each other and also the learners. Like all the time we wear masks, all the time we sanitize. Everything is different. It has changed from different way that we used to teach to now. Because we had to follow the protocols or the regulations of COVID. So we everything. My perspective has very changed based on now teachers have to teach learners virtually. A lot of things has changed, including the universities. Even the lectures has to change from we used to attend classes face to face. Now we had to attend virtually. Now they have to be able to be technological experts. So I feel like for me, my perspective based on teaching has really changed in terms of the way that we have to be protected in schools, the safety and the management of the school, and also the teaching style that has to be established in the school premises. So everything, definitely, this pandemic changed everything, the way that we see things, the way that we used to do things, the way that we have to engage as colleagues. All the time we have to wear masks during break time, protection of the learners, making sure that the learners protect each other from this pandemic. The materials, everything. Literally everything in the class did change. So my perspective has really changed from this pandemic, and it has become an all-in learning and growing, because now I'm able to be able to use technology. Now I'm able to engage in a different manner or a different dynamic. So everything has definitely changed.
Thank you so much, Nonkululeko. We would have liked to go on. We started a little bit late, so we would have liked to take the questions that are in the chat, but we have run out of time now. And I just have to close this session, but also to thank you, Judy, to thank you, Nobuntu Mazeka, to thank you, Siseko and Nonkululeko for your insights about your experiences of teaching during COVID-19. Thank you very much. And I must thank the HCI Foundation for organizing this important conversation. Thank you very much.